Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We'll start in just a few minutes. We'll just chase some people down and then we'll start. Yeah, in a good way. Start shortly. Oh, yeah, the clicker doesn't work. All right, I think we can start now. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a good day. Again, my name is Rocky Guzman. I am the Deputy Director of the Asian Research Institute for Environmental Law. And welcome to one of the last sessions one of the last sessions today in the first day of like the thematic issues for the ASEAN Environmental Law Conference, which is very interesting for a lot of us here. It's plastic pollution in Southeast Asia. Now, before we start, I'd just like to note that in the program, you might have seen that it's 3:30 to 4:30. That was an error. It's actually up to 5 p.m. So we'll have more time to discuss later. Don't worry, it's not just full presentations. We'll have more time for Q&A later. All right. And now, let me just give a brief background on the context in Southeast Asian plastic pollution. So, as many of you know, and just also some hard and fast facts, Southeast Asia is a region where you can see a lot of the world's ocean polluters, and that's a fact. Southeast Asia is a major contributor to the land-based plastic waste leakage into the world's oceans, which includes some major countries here that are major contributors to this, such as Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. Fast-growing cities, for example, are also responsible for as much as 60% of plastic waste leakage into the environment. And of this number, 75% is sourced from uncollected waste and 25% from leakage in the municipal waste management systems. It's also transboundary, and a lot of the leakage in our oceans is transported by the rivers in this region, 8 of which are in Asia. And in Southeast Asia, there are many a lot as well. So ASEAN needs tougher regulations to address plastic pollution. So it's not that depressing because there are so many other things that are happening. For instance, there's the Global Plastics Treaty that we'll be discussing later. And a lot of the countries across the world and ASEAN countries have signed up for this. And there are also a number of action plans that are happening in the region and are underway. Now, this session will discuss all these and more and how to address plastic pollution in the region. And we are joined by a fantastic set of panelists spanning from different countries in Southeast Asia and also at the region. So we'll be discussing from different levels of governance. We have some from the regional perspective, from the UNEP with Sally and Natalie, and also from national perspectives with Majas from Malaysia and Chocho from Thailand. Now, at this point, I'd like to formally introduce our first panelist who will give us a context of the regional, what's happening in the region in COBSI. From COBSI, we have Miss Natalie Harms. So Natalie Harms coordinates marine litter efforts in the COBSI Secretariat at the UNEP. She's the program officer for marine litter. Her areas of expertise include climate change mitigation, inclusive plastic waste management, and gender mainstreaming environmental management. Before joining UNEP, she worked on the protection of marine and terrestrial ecosystems at ESCAP, the ADB, and the GIZ in Indonesia, among others. So Natalie, pleased to have you here, and you have the floor.
Thanks so much, Rocky. It's such a pleasure to be here. So while we wait for the presentation to open, I think Rocky has already given quite a good overview of the issue. I'm assuming that many of you know issues of plastic pollution. I won't give a big introduction to that. Let me see if this works. Oh, great. But I'll first give a brief overview of what's happening globally. Then I'll zoom in on the regional level and just show very briefly what's happening in some countries in the region as well. So if you can help to just click on that, please. No, just there. Perfect. Is it moving? Okay. So, I mean, we all know that plastic pollution is an issue. This is not new. It is a very big issue. So we've heard some facts already from Rocky. I would like to just qualify that a lot of the data, a lot of the facts that we often hear, especially from this region, are still very much based on estimates, on modeling. There's a lot of data gaps that we still have. There's a lot of things that we do know. And we do know that, this region is a big producer. It's a big issue in this region. But a lot of the estimates are, I would say, overestimated, or they're based on very limited data. What a lot of countries do not appreciate is if we continue to point the finger at the region without at the same time recognizing that there's a big political will in this region to address this issue as well. So we've been set back slightly by COVID in terms of plastic pollution, but there is a big willingness here in this region to address the issue, but do it in a sort of equitable way and recognizing the capacities and the needs in the region as well. So I just wanted to mention that without throwing loads of facts at you. But you can see from this video that this is a transboundary issue. This is not something that one country can solve on their own. So not only does plastic move through rivers, in the marine environment, but also it is a global product. So some things might be produced here, but they're produced maybe for the European market. And then it's not only products, it's also waste that is shipped around the world. So some plastic leakage that occurs here is actually waste that is coming from somewhere else that is not being managed properly. So this is really something that we do need international and regional solutions to, as well as local and national level. And as with many issues, of course, plastic pollution hits those disadvantaged groups hardest. So communities that are depending on those ecosystems, the marine and coastal ecosystems that are impacted by plastic pollution. So it's important to keep that in mind. So just a very quick overview of what's happening globally. We are working towards an international instrument on plastic pollution. So this is what Rocky just mentioned. We had the United Nations Environment Assembly in March 2022, where countries called for the development of an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including plastic in the marine environment. So along the entire value chain. And since then, there has been an intergovernmental negotiating committee convened, which has already met twice in Uruguay and also in France this year. And it will meet again in November in Kenya, and then next year in Canada and also in Republic of Korea. And the ambition here is to have an instrument, an agreement developed by the end of 2024. So it's actually very ambitious. It's very fast. And the idea is to have a comprehensive approach. So to look at plastic from production all the way down to disposal and possibly recovery, also management in the environment. And ideally, this should build on mechanisms that we already have. So there are many frameworks, there are many bodies. We shouldn't necessarily start building new frameworks and bodies where there might already be something where we can focus on action. So this is a somewhat outdated overview, and I'm not going to go into it, but just to show you how many different frameworks there are out there that also, to some extent, touch marine litter and plastic pollution. And this doesn't include a new agreement on biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction and global biodiversity framework and so forth. So there's a lot out there. And then again, also INC at global level is developing an international instrument, especially on plastic pollution. And you'll see in here as well the regional seas, conventions, protocols, and action plans. Now in this region as well, and we saw, I think in a session earlier today, there's so many organizations who are working on this. It's great that it's, on the top of the agenda, but it is also incredibly difficult to coordinate efforts. So yes, we have ASEAN, we have the wider ASEAN +3, we have COPSI, and I'll get to that in a moment, but we also have PEMC, NAUPAP, APEC, we have G20 commitments. So there's a lot of overlap, and we do need to ensure that it's mutually reinforcing and that we can avoid sort of duplication of efforts and reporting burdens for countries. So the regional seas programs, there are 18 regional seas programs around the world administered by different organizations, 7 of which are administered by UNEP, and this includes the coordinating body on the seas of East Asia. So this is the East Asian Seas Action Plan. And many of these regional seas programs also have regional action plans on marine litter. So this is one of the mechanisms that we can use to address plastic pollution. So briefly on COPSI, so this is the organization that I work with. Basically, the East Asian Seas Action Plan looks at the protection and sustainable development of the marine and coastal environment in the East Asian Seas. So this is Southeast Asia and East Asia, 9 countries in total. And the secretariat is hosted by Thailand here in Bangkok and administered by the United Nations Environment Programme. So it is a separate intergovernmental body, but the secretariat is administered by UNEP. And in COPSI as well, we do have frameworks that are relevant for plastic pollution and marine litter. So we have strategic directions, but importantly, we do also have a regional action plan on marine litter that countries adopted in 2019. And this guides action to address land-based sources as well as sea-based sources of marine litter. So this all includes, not only sort of the bottles and bags and straws that you see on beaches, but it also includes ghost nets and shipping waste. And it also looks at strengthening monitoring and assessment. So this is this issue of ensuring that we have good, robust, comparable data in the region that can inform action and that can help us track progress over time as well. And it also creates enabling conditions for action. So this includes knowledge sharing in the region, coordinating across actors in the region. This is also about outreach, education, access to research. So bringing science and policy together. Actually won't go into that in detail. It seems to be moving a bit oddly. Okay, now let me just go to this. This is fine. So how do we implement the regional action plan on marine litter? One thing that we do is, we just heard about INC. We do provide support to countries to be able to meaningfully participate at international level. So this makes sure that, countries can actually join the negotiations. They have all the information they need to meaningfully negotiate something that links to national priorities and capacities and regional priorities as well. And one important area that we work on is data collection and management. So we have developed regional guidance on how we can harmonize how countries collect data. So really looking at what approaches are good practice, are robust, give us comparable data in the region of plastic that is already in the environment so that we can address it appropriately. There's a lot of capacity building, training that goes with that. We're conducting surveys, establishing baselines in countries so that we have good on-the-ground data. We don't have to rely on those oversighted estimates that often point the finger without a lot of data behind it. So here's just some pictures of some of the work that we have been doing with partners where we provide training on how to assess, survey plastic in the environment. So this includes inland as well as shorelines, rivers, sea surface, sediments. So there's many different areas where we do this. This kind of data needs to be, of course, complemented by data that is a bit further up the value chain. So this is plastic waste leakage data. And further up, it's also material flow analyses, import and export of plastics, including plastic waste. So all of these different data sources, we're also supporting countries to bring them together and manage at national level to inform action. And I just wanted to share as well that we have a regional node of the Global Partnership on Plastic Pollution and Marine Litter. It's become longer, this abbreviation, recently. So this is our knowledge hub where we try to bring, together a map of good practices. We have access to a regional research database. So there's over 700 peer-reviewed publications and the data in there as well. So we're really trying to support knowledge management in the region to be able to address this issue. We recently developed a toolbox as well on ghost gear. So like I said, it's not only looking at what's happening at land, it's also ocean-based activities. So this provides case studies for replication, guidance. There's some videos as well, and this will also be available in a couple of days online. I'm not going to go into this. I'm just giving an example of how we're supporting countries to really implement national and regional frameworks. So we work with them to replicate good practices, especially also in islands and remote communities where there is no central waste management infrastructure. And there's a range of projects that we do. So I'm not going to go into this, but basically we're providing some support to also turn words on paper into action. So this is one of the issues, that we have many different frameworks and action plans, but the question is really, how can we identify where progress has been already made? Can we share that learning in the region? Many countries are, for instance, working on extended producer responsibility systems. Some countries already have them. Can we not learn from how they overcame challenges, for instance, replicate and upscale good practices so that we can then also collect data and track how much progress we have been making to really achieve the frameworks that we've developed? Oops. So again, I'm sorry that these slides are all a bit mixed. I'm going to jump back again. Here we go. No, it's fine. So just an overview of all the different frameworks that we see at national level. And this is not exhaustive, and it's not, again, there's already been some updates, but many countries in this region, I mean, everybody has some form of regulation that is related to plastic waste or plastic pollution or marine litter. Some are more advanced, some are less advanced. They're all working on it. There's a huge sort of political will to address this issue in the region. And it really is up to us also to support, to share that knowledge, and to coordinate these efforts, also cross-development partners. Everybody's jumping on the plastic pollution boat, which is great, but it does mean that we need to coordinate our efforts so that we can address this really in a coordinated way. Right, I'll jump back to the takeaway messages. So what I'm trying to say is plastic pollution is a transboundary challenge. It requires action at every single level. So this includes local level, national level, regional level, and also global, international. There is a range of organizations in this region, but also globally, different frameworks, many different initiatives on marine litter and plastic pollution. It's also a very complex challenge. So, the plastic value chain is very complex. There's many issues that we need to address, and everybody has different expertise and different mandate. But I think it's about coordinating and putting those puzzle pieces together. There's an opportunity to align with frameworks that already exist and mechanisms that already exist, also when we want to implement and track progress against a global framework. So do we need to start from scratch with everything? No, I don't think we do. I think there's a lot there with ASEAN, but also with many other regional bodies as well that we can build on. And I think that any kind of progress reporting and implementation of an international instrument really can only work if we have the right information and if we build on countries' capacities. And here we can really also leverage mechanisms like the regional Cs to coordinate those efforts. We need frameworks that are based on evidence, not just on something that is, cool and sexy at the time, with clear targets, clear timelines, but also clear provisions on how we can track progress. And I think some of the priorities there really include that we harmonize the way that we collect and manage data. This doesn't mean that everybody needs to do it the same, but it needs to be interoperable, and we need to be able to compare data so that we can address this at a transboundary level, replicating good practices, sharing knowledge, and having that sort of regional coordination. So yeah, those would be my takeaway messages, and I hope I've stayed in time. Thank you, Rocky.
Thank you very much, Natalie, for that very comprehensive and clear on all the efforts that are happening at the regional level for the COB-C countries. So it's not just specifically Southeast Asian countries, right? There's a number of East Asian countries who are part of COB-C as well. And there are so many things that are happening. A few things that I'd like to highlight is first, yes, this is a transboundary challenge that requires a number of interventions at different levels. So it's good that we have here a regional perspective, but we'll also have national perspective on how national governments are actually implementing these action plans and what's happening at the local level as well, as these are very complex challenges. And also very I think interesting for this particular conference is the Global Plastics Treaty. So I think we'll have more of that discussion later and what it means, what it might look like, and how it would be cascaded down at the national level and at the local level later on. But thank you again, Natalie, for the work that COBC is doing and to have the enabling conditions through knowledge sharing and capacity building. And we can talk more about that and how we can work together later. Now I'd like to go to the next speaker. We have a panelist from Malaysia. We have Miss Mageswari Sangarilang.
It's Mageswari Sangaralingam.
Sorry for that. Mages is a senior research officer for the Consumers Association of Penang and Sabahat Alam, Malaysia. Mages advocates for sustainable alternatives to the present policies in areas such as food production, fisheries, waste management, plastic pollution. She's also the honorary secretary of Sabahat Alam Malaysia, or Friends of the Earth Malaysia, coordinating a number of community and environment conservation and protection projects. Mages, thank you very much for being here, and you have the floor.
Good day, everyone. So when I was thinking of the title of the presentation, should I be talking on waste trade? But then when we are talking about waste trade, it's like practically it's like dumping of waste into our shores, especially in the Southeast Asia and also other countries where you see that, in the name of trade, we are being a dumping ground. Okay, so I work for the Consumers Association of Penang, which is a consumer organization, and also Friends of the Earth Malaysia is a sister organization of Consumer Association of Penang. And we are members of Break Free from Plastic and also International Pollutants Elimination Network and Global Alliance for Incidental Alternatives. So we all work together in terms of this issue on waste management. Yeah. So I'll go to the next slide. Okay. So the content of my presentation will be in terms of plastic waste trade, where I'll be sharing with you some data. In terms of Basel Convention, probably not everyone is aware of Basel Convention, so I'll be talking a little bit about Basel Convention. And we're talking about plastics, but then in terms of the trade, there are also hidden plastics. So what is that? So I will also be describing that, and also some recommendations in terms of the policy recommendations. Next. Okay. So when you're talking about plastics, you can see that this is infographic by International Pollutants Elimination Network. The whole life cycle of plastics, it's really toxic, in terms of the extraction itself. And Natalie had also mentioned about some of the conventions, international conventions. So in terms of plastic waste trade, we also have the Basel Convention, which looks into recent plastic waste amendments, which I'll be discussing later, and also the chemicals that are being used in plastics. Some of it are very toxic, and which are persistent organic pollutants. So this comes under the Stockholm Convention. Yeah. So next, I've got a lot of things. So you can see in terms of the plastic waste trade, the data, it shows like it had reduced a bit, but actually not so. From 2017 to 2021, you can see the global plastic waste exports. And at that time, it was mostly going to China, in terms of the trade. And then in 2017, China notified the WTO that they are going to ban imports of 24 types of waste. This included plastic waste. At that time, then, the whole world became chaotic. Most of the countries were producing all this waste, generating waste, especially in the developed countries. There were lots of waste. What are they going to do with this waste? They were actually shifting their responsibility to China. When China closed its doors, what happened? So what happened was, you can still see the destination of the global plastic waste exports. It was going to mostly some other countries, especially in Southeast Asia. Malaysia became the top destination for this waste in 2018. And we also saw Thailand, Indonesia becoming major recipients of this waste. And you can still see, although there is the plastic waste amendments, the Basel Convention, still a lot of waste is coming in. They say it's cleaner waste, but then we find that Japan is a major exporter of waste, yeah, and it is mostly coming to, you can see the top is Malaysia again, and but the Malaysian government says no, Japan's waste is cleaner, so it's fine. But no, Japan is a developed country. Why can't it, recycle its own waste? Why do you have to send it to Southeast Asia to be processed? Yeah, so this is we call it an injustice. Yeah. Okay, so what's happening? Yeah, actually happening on the ground. You can see some pictures here in Indonesia. Yeah, you can see all that smoke. What was happening is some of this waste, plastic waste, comes in the paper bales. Yeah, in Surabaya, they do have a lot of paper waste recycling plants. So what happens to the plastic waste in there, which is considered residual waste? Some of the communities, the villages, were burning it for fuel, yeah, to make tofu. And what was found later, there is a local organization there, Ecoton. They had sent a sample of eggs, and there were dioxins in eggs. You know what dioxins are? Dioxins are carcinogenic, and so there will be impacts to the communities, yeah, who are eating the eggs. And in Malaysia, as I mentioned, not all plastics can be recycled. So if it's contaminated or it's mixed plastic, it is being dumped. So this is a dumping ground in a remote agriculture land. Yeah, in Thailand, yeah, there's a lot of electronic waste coming in, and plastic waste, which is also being burnt. Later, Chocho will be, I think, sharing with us more in terms of the local context. In Philippines, they had been campaigning for many years, yeah, to send back waste to Canada, and then later on to South Korea, and probably it is still happening. Yeah, we are being dumping ground because there's a lot of illegal waste that is coming in. So there was a group in Malaysia which had done a study in terms of what's happening. Yeah, so this is due to poor governance. Although this is a Malaysian context, but I feel it could be the same in all the other Southeast Asian countries. Yeah, poor monitoring and enforcement, smuggling or illegal trafficking through false declaration of the waste. Yeah, and so there are syndicates also from China, because China closed its doors. We found that not Chinese waste is coming, but Chinese investors were coming into Southeast Asian countries and starting up their recycling plants. Some were illegal because if you want to start up properly, it might take a few years. You have to have the environmental impact assessment reports and permits. Yeah. So what the easy way is just to start an illegal plant. So that's where the problem started. Yeah. And there is also allegation of corruption. So since it's coming through the ports, so what's happening? What is the customs doing? Yeah. So there could be some corruption happening. So there are a lot of issues here, but I've got only 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So I shall go to the next one. So talking about the Basel Convention, because since it became a very big issue, we have to consider this plastic waste as hazardous waste. So Basel Convention is a convention on the control of transboundary movement of hazardous waste, yeah, and its disposal. And the scope, it limits the trade of hazardous waste between countries, specifically from the global north, the developed countries, to the global south. There are 191 parties as of June 2023. USA, which is a major exporter of waste, including hazardous waste like electronic waste, is not a party to the treaty. So this is really a lot of countries are concerned about this. Yeah, and then there is also the Basel Ban Amendment. Malaysia is a party to the Basel Ban Amendment. Philippines is not, and a lot of NGOs in Philippines are campaigning for the national government to be a party to the Basel Ban Amendment. So technically, as I had been going through some reports, the amendment is only binding on those that ratify it, but then all Basel Convention parties, most of us are Basel Convention parties, they should still respect the import prohibitions, which is already considered in the convention. So next, so in 2019, a lot of NGOs supported the Norwegian government's proposal to include certain types of plastic as hazardous waste. Yeah, so this was a major achievement for us, NGOs who were campaigning, because in this is kind of historic also, just like the UNEA plastic treaty. Within 1 year, we managed to get these plastic waste amendments to be approved. Yeah, and we got a lot of signatures from many countries. So what was the outcome? The outcome was certain plastic waste were added to the Basel Convention. It's not that good, but then at least there were certain amendments. Prior informed consent, which requires exporters to obtain the consent of receiving countries. Yeah, so if Japan wants to send a little bit of mixed or contaminated waste, they will have to inform Malaysia, and Malaysian government has to agree to it. Yeah, so this is an important tool, yeah, to stop the dumping. Yeah, and also the new entries, it became effective as of January 2021. Yeah, and there has been a review of what happened by Basel Action Network and a few NGOs from each country. So we did have a review on that. Like a report card, there were still some issues that has to be addressed. Yeah. So the plastic waste amendments, some people would think that this is a total ban, but actually it's not. It's just a restriction. Yeah. And so it's not a ban on the import or the export of plastic waste. Okay, so I had spoken to you about hidden plastics. So this has also been an issue that we've been looking into through Basel Action Network and other groups in Break Free from Plastic. So you can, like even in our electrical products, our computers, you do have plastic, yeah, in it. You also have contaminated plastic waste in the paper bales. There's also textile waste. 60% of our textiles are now mostly plastic. So what happens to the used clothes? Refuse derived fuels. I will explain to you what this means. Does everyone know about RDFs and PEFs? Probably not, unless you're working on this issue. Yeah, and also rubber and tire waste. That also has plastics. Yeah, it's not only rubber. It's not only rubber and wires. Yeah, there's also plastic content. So what happens to all this? It's still being traded. Yeah. Okay. And one thing that NGOs are trying to do is tracking how much of this waste are coming in, but it's so difficult. Yeah. In terms of the harmonized system codes, it's like ambiguous. Yeah. In some ways, and sometimes it doesn't cover everything. So these are some of the HS codes. Yeah. Which I would not go in further. You would have this presentation, and then you can look into it. Yeah. And so a few of us, NGOs, Eco Waste Coalition from Philippines, Nexus 3 from Indonesia, National Toxics Network in Australia, we had tried to track what's happening in terms of refuse-derived fuel. And there have been publications which have been published by the International Pollutants Elimination Network. You can get these publications from the website. And what happened is, like, we can still say, although there is a prohibition of certain plastic waste to be traded, it is coming through as RDF. RDF is like at least 30 to 40% of mixed plastics. It's in your municipal solid waste, it's in your construction waste, it's mixed up. And where does it go? So the RDF is normally used to fuel, or also co-processing in cement plants, yeah, or also the coal-fired power plants. Yeah, so these are some of the pictures that I have taken in Malaysia, yeah, in terms of RDF. And we also have waste tire exports from Australia still coming in to Malaysia, and some of it has gone into flames. Yeah, you can see the next picture here. And what happens in the RDF in cement kilns? It burns. It's just like an incinerator. Yeah, you have all these toxic emissions coming out from the burning of RDF. So waste-based fuels in the Basel Convention, it's not really clear. So we are now campaigning for the governments to clearly identify RDF, and it's like a lot of names, yeah, as SRF, PEF, all this should be included in the Basel Convention. Okay, so these are the recommendations by IPEN in terms of tackling plastic waste fuel and also RDF. It's a lot of recommendations which we have been campaigning to and sending to our national governments. And these are pictures of, what happens to your electronic waste, the wires, what happens to that? It's shredded and it's just dumped. And I think in Thailand, it's the same also. And it's also being burnt. So these are really toxic. Yeah, hidden plastic in paper bills. These are pictures from Malaysia and also Indonesia. There's already publications on that. So we in the NGOs, we publish a lot so that, we use it for advocacy, yeah, and also get the government, national government and also regionally to adopt that. Plastics in textile waste, yeah, as I had mentioned earlier. So what are our demands? Prevent dumping. We need to end this waste colonialism. We're calling it waste colonialism. Yeah, it's like, and yesterday someone said environmental imperialism. So there's a lot of name that we have come up with. So we want ban in trade of waste-based fuels. So these are the RDFs. Ensure full traceability and transparency of waste shipments. So this is in terms of the HS codes, yeah. And reinforce monitoring and enforcement. Yeah, if we cannot ban, at least at this time, we need to have strict monitoring, yeah. And also prioritize waste reduction. It doesn't matter, you say ban waste trade, but then if you're still producing so much of plastics, yeah, what happens? It will increase dumping elsewhere and also in your own countries, yeah. Since US could not export out, what happened? They were just sending it to neighboring states there, or they were sending through Mexico and then sending it to other countries. So, okay, so no false solutions. This is meaning no cement kilns, and in the UNEA plastics treaty also, they're now talking about plastic credits. So this is all false solutions that we should be without. Okay, so there are a lot of policy recommendations that you can look into. What should happen in the exporting countries and what should happen in the importing countries. Okay, so thank you. And I would like to acknowledge all these organizations that have also helped us in this work. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Magus. That was very insightful, and I feel like I got like so much knowledge from that presentation on plastic waste trade. Now, I just like to highlight why plastic waste trade is important in the context of this discussion. Not only does it contribute to plastic pollution when it leaks into the environment, to the open environment, and eventually to the marine environment, but it also has the opportunity, or it also violates the right of the people, right? Because it deals with chemicals and waste. And these could have very detrimental impacts to the communities around where these wastes are dumped. But yeah, specifically for legal plastic waste trade, this has a lot of legal components, as Magus has mentioned, on the international framework, on the Basel Convention, the ban, and the plastic waste amendments, but also at the national level. We'd have to discuss this more on waste crime, on issues such as smuggling, as well as false declarations, all these things, and they just perpetuate the power imbalances between other jurisdictions and also countries in Southeast Asia. So thank you for highlighting all these issues, Magus. And I'm sure we'll have more of that later because there's also another session, there's also another panelist who will be discussing more of that. But at this point, we'll proceed with the third panelist. We have, I hope I get this right. We have Chocho Devaporihartakula. Yes. So Chocho is the program manager for the Asian Environmental Compliance Enforcement Network, or ASEN, and she coordinates plastic pollution projects in Southeast Asia, including the Regional Knowledge Center for Marine Plastic Debris of the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, or AREA. She has also served as training event specialist at the AIT, where she has worked extensively on climate change capacity building with governments and other stakeholders. Chocho, thank you, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Rocky, and also thank you to Matthew for allowing me to present here. So today I'm going to be presenting about local solution to address plastic pollution, with the focus at one of our projects to develop zero plastic waste island. So before I go into detail about my presentation, allow me to briefly introduce the Asian Environmental Compliance and Enforcement Network. So basically, we were established in 2005 with assistance from USAID and ADB to promote improved compliance and environmental law and regulation in Asia. Currently, we have 18 member countries, and ASEAN is recognized as a unique grouping of senior environmental officials and an innovative platform for facilitating positive change through member cooperation. The Institute for Global Environmental Strategy has served as our secretariat since 2012. So I think we've been talking a lot about addressing plastic pollution, but I guess first we also need to understand the challenges of waste management in Thailand or at local level first. So basically, we know that due to inefficient management of municipal solid waste, a lot of waste has actually been accumulated on the land. Although various measures such as source reduction, 3Rs, activity, and waste separation are being implemented, but the amount of waste continue to increase. And this is because many of the measure is actually done on voluntary basis by the local community. And there is still a lack of regulation and enforcement by government authority, especially at the local government level. A large amount of accumulated municipal solid waste in the environment is due to the improper management, inadequate treatment and disposal system due to high land price and long duration of the permit process, also public resistance. In Thailand, we have hundreds of local authority organizations, but some of them do not actually prioritize waste management. This is not because they do not want to, but sometimes it's actually due to insufficient budget and lack of human resources. For example, one of the pilot area where I've been working, the city actually has to focus on 28 areas, and they actually have limited budget, so they can't actually, fulfill their achievement in that way. So insufficient measure for special cases such as tourist area, low public awareness, and also no ordinance for municipal solid waste management, low tipping fee do not cover treatment and disposal. And then if we look into the 23 coastal provinces in Thailand, in 2020, it was estimated that 11 million tons of solid waste were generated, and about 2.86 million tons are improperly disposed of which 343,000 tons approximately is plastic waste, and 34 to 51,000 tons is marine debris. If you see the red square on the right-hand side, that's the location where our project is currently being implemented in Rayong province. So in Rayong province where we actually implemented project, we actually chose Samet Island, which is actually managed by Pay Sub-District. I'm not going into all of this local government regulation, but the first few things that I think that I should highlight is the littering and illegal dumping are actually prohibited. And also owner of public space, which means, hotel owner, resort, or restaurant must ensure cleanliness and hygiene in their area. And also allow pay official to collect and dispose of waste and pay a fee for providing the service. However, in the reality is a little bit different because all of these photos were actually taken on the island. So litter is actually found all over the island. This was mainly because plastic the most of them was plastic, which also found on main road, on beaches, and in community areas. Much of the litter actually leak into the marine environment during the monsoon season. Plastic bottles were found to make up a large part of the waste. Illegal dumping is becoming more and more problematic on the island. Law enforcement is not practiced, and waste disposal is mismanaged. During the project period, we could clearly see that illegal dumping has increased. And small businesses that live along the alley and far from the waste dumping site are likely to dispose their waste illegally in the public space. So given the existing condition of the island itself, so we actually implement the Zero Plastic Waste Island. So this project is actually implemented under the city-to-city collaboration between the city of Kitakyushu, Rayong Provincial Administrative Organization, and Pei Sub-District. So the project is to provide potential plastic waste solution for island and rural area where collected plastic waste need to be landfill or shipped. So we are looking at creating Zero Plastic Waste Island by developing a closed loop island system which can collect plastic waste and other waste into oil on Smith Island. If successful, this model can also be applied and replicated in other locations that show interest in implementing a similar project. And also, we also support local authority and stakeholder in implementing a resource circulation model on the island to add value to community and resort and promote tourism. So what we have done so far, so in 2021 and 2022, we actually conducted a visibility study. So this actually include regulatory assessment, waste survey and analysis, material flow analysis, certification scheme for verifying Zero Plastic Island, and also pilot demonstration of Urban Rig. Urban Rig is the technology that we use to turn plastic waste into oil, and also development of business model. And for in 2023, as of now, so basically we are in the process of supporting the local people and also the local authority on the island. So the planned activities, it actually include the provision of technological advance to convert plastic waste into recovered oil. Local engagement through waste collection system improvement, awareness raising campaign, capacity building, community enterprise, waste bank, etc. We will also incorporate Internet of Things through Google.org, which is one of our support organization, and also marketing channel of Recover Oil. So if this is successful, we would like to expand to other area in Thailand as well. So basically, based on the feasibility study we have done, we actually did a stakeholder mapping and also plastic life cycle. And that's actually allowed us to estimate how much plastic is actually, generated on the island. Plastic inflow actually come from import of plastic product and also marine debris entering the island. So each of this flow actually represent the life cycle of plastic. And with this, we actually are now working with the local community and also local resort hotels and also local authority to actually increase waste separation system. This is actually done by, we actually create a program where they can actually participate, and then each of them will need to separate their waste, and then we actually send the team to actually weigh it and record. And the plastic waste will be actually collected and also will be given to our project and actually turned into oil. Oops. Oil. Oh, sorry. This one. Yeah, sorry. So the last one, sorry. Next. Yeah, this one. So some of the key takeaway messages from my side would be, although we know that Thailand and Southeast Asian countries have passed some regulation, but there is still a lack of comprehensive policy that provide incentive for 3Rs activity and also EPR activity. So if we would like to see the policy that is implementable and also enforceable, we also need to consider local conditions as well as the capacity of small and medium-sized businesses and the provision of possible support to them. And reduce food-related plastic, especially single-use plastic, to achieve sustainable behavioral change. So for example, on Smith Island, there is a ban on the use of single-use plastic in national park because Smith Island is considered a national park, but implementation is actually low due to weak enforcement, so people don't really follow. Separate food waste from other waste provide more opportunity for the circular economy to convert waste into recycled material or energy. There should also be a waste truck that collect recyclable waste without mixing it with other waste that have already been separated by the people. Financial assistance as well as incentive should be provided to local authority and businesses to improve the waste collection and separation system and related infrastructure, and also to encourage local innovation and technologies. Capacity development should be provided to local authorities to improve compliance and enforcement, which is crucial for tackling plastic pollution. The last 2 points are very important. So some of the action plans at national and regional level are sometimes very ambitious and sometimes are unimplementable. So, and also take little account of the capacity of local government, which play a crucial role in waste collection, recycling, and disposal. The role of local government should be strengthened as they are directly responsible for the increase in plastic waste and ensure sound waste management and implementation, especially when we are now in the process of developing a global treaty to combat plastic pollution. That is for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Chocho, and for keeping in time. Everyone has been on time for this panel. Just a few highlights, and thank you for giving us the context on the challenges that are being met at the local level. The Zero Waste Island project is quite interesting as it does a business model, right? And this is something that perhaps can be scaled up in other jurisdictions, in other places as well. And it's a good thing that you mentioned that because this is already such an advanced initiative at the local level, this could be something that could be taken by the national governments in creating their comprehensive policy frameworks. A number of countries in Southeast Asia, for example, have extended producer responsibility frameworks that are currently at work, in the works. So that might be something that we can learn from, like the examples that you've had in Koh Samet. So again, thank you very much, Chocho. And we will have our last speaker for this afternoon. And for the whole day, we have an intervention from Sally Yang. Sally is the program manager and as the program officer in the law division of the UNEP, and she supports the implementation in the area of environmental law and governance, specifically in the field of environmental crime and judicial capacity building. She manages UNEP activities contributing to the project Unwaste, tackling waste trafficking to support a circular economy, which is being implemented in partnership with the United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime. Sally, over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me well? Or should I put it
Can
closer?
you go closer, please?
Is this better? Okay. When we're clicking onto the video, would you be helping me doing that? Or can I actually do it here? Yeah, all right. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So we thought it's appropriate to introduce in this session a project that UNEP is working with UNODC on. It's called Unwaste, Tackling Waste Trafficking to Support a Circular Economy. So waste trafficking has severe implications for the environment and human health due to improper waste management. We have had examples from our guest speakers here already. There are economic impacts too through the diversion of resources such as tax revenue, as well as having an adverse effect on trade and competition, putting law-abiding businesses at an economic disadvantage. Examples of impacts on environment are pollution, land degradation, illegal landfills, illegal storage sites, and other public ecosystems. Alternatively, it is burned in the open, and we have seen that. Waste imported illegally often do not follow safe waste management practices and often ends up in illegal landfills or are burned openly, as we mentioned, releasing black carbon and persistent organic pollutants, or POP, which are dangerous for public health. While open burning is less documented, we feel it, obviously. And according to the Basel Convention, on the control of the Basel Convention, basically, on the control of transboundary movement of hazardous waste and their disposal, strengthened in 2019 with the plastic waste amendments, plastic waste trade has become illegal. Most of it has become illegal if it does not follow the convention protocols, particularly that both exporting and importing countries must consent to the exchange. Now, what has happened then is that it has led to the emergence of an illicit plastic waste economy, which includes fraudulently mixing clean with unclean plastics or camouflaging its origin. They can be carbon intensive to dispose of, as we've mentioned, or possibly, particularly if they're burned in the open. So plastic waste, particularly that which enters into the oceans, also erodes marine ecosystems and has consequences for biodiversity. Right. So the issue of illegal waste shipments to Southeast Asia has increasingly gained attention since 2018. And that's when China banned the importation of 24 types of recyclable materials, including plastics, to put a halt on a well-established model of delocalization of waste. Waste, both legal and illegal, started to be redirected to other countries, particularly in Southeast Asia. So Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia were such destinations. And the reason why I mentioned these countries specifically is because they are the focus of the Unwaste project that I've mentioned. The management of the sudden sharp and increase in waste import has proven challenging, and these countries has responded by sending back waste containers to the countries of origin, and some of them announcing a ban on import of plastics and stopping of issuance of new import license by some of these countries. So the European Commission estimates that the illegal waste shipments within the EU and between third countries and the EU represented about 15 to 30% of the total EU waste trade, generating euros 9.5 billion in annual revenue from the illicit waste market in the EU itself. In 2021, the European Commission proposes new rules for the EU waste shipments to better tackle illegal waste trade, both within the EU and between the third countries and the EU. And, you know, specifically to waste trafficking, I have to borrow this from a prosecutor, actually a Thai prosecutor. He mentioned, waste trafficking is never random or opportunistic. Waste trafficking is always organized. You cannot opportunistically pick up waste and decide to ship it in the tons. It's always organized. And why we're mentioning this is because then, therefore, waste trafficking has to be taken seriously. So some of the challenges, as has been mentioned already, is in terms of enforcement implementation. And enforcement is inadequate traceability due to limited inspection capacity, lack of traceability after the waste reaches the destination. As mentioned, concealment, mislabeling, misdeclaration of shipments, and insufficient capacity for enforcement. Lack of adequate sanctions for the illegal waste traffic, waste trade activities, and of course, the involvement of organized crime groups. So, and there are many other factors as well. But so the Unwaste project, which is funded by the European Union, and that's why I've been mentioning a lot about what's happening in the EU, is implemented by UNODC together with UNEP, and it's aimed to understand waste flow between the EU and Southeast Asia by looking into the illegal trafficking, well, actually both legal and illegal trafficking data and information that we can gather and build upon the current and encouraging cooperation between the regulatory agencies, enforcement, and criminal justice institutions. So as I've mentioned, the focus countries at the moment are Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam. And in order to facilitate regional dialogues, we also look into some of the regional aspects, including the legal framework. So we have a video that would sort of succinctly capture what Unwaste is about. So can you play it? I think you need to enable. It's okay. What I can do is I can look for it on the internet, and then I'll play it at the end of the presentation if we have time. Yeah. So no problem. Maybe you can put it on okay. So as I mentioned, it is funded by the EU, and we're focusing on the 4 countries, but we do have the ASEAN aspects. Stop sharing screen. Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Our current practices around production, consumption, and discarding are not sustainable and create too much waste. Instead, we must adopt a circular system focused on circular design that reduces, reuses, and recycles. In such a system, waste as a commodity is either processed domestically or exported for recycling to make new products. But the export of illegal waste, particularly toxic, hazardous, contaminated, or unrecyclable waste, is often hidden with legal waste shipments using fraudulent documents. Despite existing regulations, waste traffickers are empowered by ineffective law enforcement, low penalties, and opportunities for easy profits. Illegal waste that is trafficked harms the environment, economy, and health of communities in recipient countries. But the tide is turning. Countries in Southeast Asia, unwilling to be burdened by illegal waste, are refusing shipments and tightening controls and regulations. UNODC and its partners are taking steps to combat waste trafficking with Unwaste. This project will provide a better understanding of waste flows, both legal and illegal, for the European Union to Southeast Asia. Unwaste aims to help uncover waste trafficking networks and to disrupt illegal activities. Unwaste will help build a transparent partnership between Europe and Southeast Asia that will limit the ease and profitability of waste trafficking. It's time to get serious about addressing waste pollution and to unlock the circular economy with Unwaste.
Okay. I think that gives a very good overview of what the Unwaste project is. And I should stop speaking from there. But of course, I have more to say. Right. So, well, it is important to note that the Unwaste project is built upon the work done by the Waste Force project. The Waste Force project was also funded by the EU, and it's a cooperation efforts amongst, it supports international cooperation efforts amongst authorities engaged in the fight against the illegal trade and management of waste. So some of the products developed under the Waste Force project was guidance for prosecutors of waste crime. We have one of the developers behind the scene sitting here. Best practices in repatriation of illegal waste shipments from Asia to Europe, which is very important in the light of the China ban. And that was very useful. An assessment of information exchange mechanisms used in cases of illegal shipment of waste, and basically a paper on underused information exchange mechanism in case of dealing with illegal waste shipments. So it was as a result of the Waste Force project that we have developed further the Unwaste project. These are the QR codes that I'll put in later, which you can go in and have a look at it. So just very quickly, for the Unwaste project, we actually work with the various government agencies, departments, and divisions to engage in dialogues and identify what are the cooperation mechanisms, what are the regulatory agencies involved, and examine how existing policies on import and exports and management of waste can be done, and providing recommendations for reforms. It's really to support also the dialogue between the EU and the countries in this region as to how we can be supported in ensuring that, you know, waste trafficking is tackled to support the development of circular economy. So
Sally, if you can wrap up.
We have time?
No more.
No, we don't have time.
We don't have time.
All right. So just very quickly, what UNEP will be developing, let me click this off, right, are four major components: comprehensive studies detailing policy and legislative guides to inform the trends of waste flow from Europe to Southeast Asia. This will be ASEAN-based. And again, we have another developer in the background that's helping us to do that, sitting there at the facilitators table. We'll also be doing a comparative analysis of the administrative and criminal remedies adopted to respond to violation of the legal framework. It will be just on the 4 focus countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. We're also in the process of developing a policy papers on the obstacles of waste trafficking, or obstacles that waste trafficking poses to the development of the circular economy, and also highlighting best practices to support a better understanding of how we can deal with this issue, and of course to support the policy dialogue again between the EU and countries of this region. Last but not least is we will be developing a feasibility study of new tools and initiatives relevant to the promotion or development of joint database or real-time information exchange relating to custom procedure. And this is also built upon what has been developed during the Waste Force project. We can skip that, and some of these findings will be Some of these findings will be put in a comprehensive report that will be released by the end of this year. So look out for that. And here are the resources which can find more information on the Waste project. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Sally, for that overview of the Unwaste project. And yeah, we're gonna have like an exciting next few months because we have more resources that we would share with you on the context of illegal waste trade in the ASEAN region. So watch out for that. So again, thank you, Sally. And at this point, I'd like to thank all the panelists. We have Natalie, Magus, Chocho, and Sally for their fantastic presentations on this panel. Let's give them a round of applause first. And we now open the floor to any of your questions, any of your queries, comments, reactions to what we've heard tonight and this afternoon on plastic pollution in Southeast Asia. I'll maybe get a couple of questions first. Yes, Miss, could you kindly introduce yourself first also?
Thank you. It's not a question, but I would like to add more information from Natalie for about the plastic waste management in Thailand. So now we have the roadmap and the action plan on the plastic waste management, and we developed the law on the packaging waste management. I think this year we will get the draft of the law and will be processed for the law enforcement in the future. The law is included for the EPR scheme for the packaging waste because we think that we have the voluntary program on the plastic waste in our country, but it's a long time, but it's not have how to say, it's not reduce the plastic pollution anymore. So we think that the law and regulation need to enforce for the reduce the plastic pollution. And more in Thailand, we announced to prohibit for the plastic scrap import to Thailand from the 1st of January to 2025. So we need to use the domestic waste to serve as the circular economy concept. And Thailand support for the international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution to develop the new instrument. In the future, we hope to work with the all international organization, including for the COP-C also. Thank you.
Anybody else have a question first on any of the topics? Plastic pollution? None for now. Okay, would you like to respond to that first?
Thank you. So Kunwasana from the Pollution Control Department in Thailand. I think, Thailand is a really good example of what is happening already in the region. There's a lot going on in Thailand, and still, of course, it's a huge issue. We've not really managed to address that. We still need to do more to address plastic pollution, right? You just mentioned it. We have this fantastic roadmap. I remember when it came out, I was really excited. It said, no more plastic straws from a certain time, no more styrofoam packaging, and, perfect. But, then there's that link also with how do those kind of regulations, how does it link with legislation and with law enforcement, and how can you actually make sure that that's implemented in a country that's big like Thailand, and you have many tourism businesses that also rely on a lot of these products. You have many islands where they can't get rid of their waste once it's there and people bring it onto the island. So there's a lot of these practical questions of how do you enforce and how do you also monitor whether something is being enforced, and that takes a lot of resources. So I think that is still a gap, and that's not just a gap in Thailand. That's, I think, a gap around the world. There's a lot of shiny regulations and frameworks, but then enforcement and really seeing how things are being implemented and what impact that's having on the environment, that's really something where there's a big gap. And I do think that that is something where, we can continue to work together to make sure that we make best use of these great frameworks that Thailand and other countries are already developing. But I think, it's an important first step. You need to have those frameworks. but then you do need to work towards how do we actually implement them. And this will be really important at the international level as well. And that's why I'm so happy that Thailand is a strong supporter of having legally binding elements in an agreement, because voluntary measures, as good as they are, they're not enough. You know, if something is voluntary, then you can always have other interests that will trump that sort of, you know, voluntary agreement. Even if, you know, everybody comes together and says this is an issue, you can say, yeah, but first we need to do this, or we can't do it right now. So I do think that if we want to tackle this meaningfully, we will need to have some legally binding elements, and we also need to have provisions on how we can enforce them, and we need to have provisions on how we can really monitor that progress. And this is incredibly difficult, especially at the international level. There's not one body that will, there's like not a world police, you know, who will then say who has done what. So we really need to think about how we can actually implement something and track it as well, not just put words on paper. But it is very important that we put those words on paper and that they're meaningful. But it's a very, very complex issue. So I am very happy that Thailand is taking a sort of strong position on this in the region as well.
Very much, Natalie. And anybody else? Any other questions? Yes, Colleen.
Hello, I'm gonna wear my other personality, which is the campaigner of Echoist Coalition in the Philippines. And I'd like to echo with the Magus on to end waste colonialism. Not just the countries that were mentioned earlier, who are the top exporters of plastics, are also the same countries technically, like Japan, Germany, and the US, who are the plastic manufacturers in the world. And these countries are shipping their waste to countries like the Philippines and Southeast Asia. And with the global plastic treaty that's currently ongoing, how do you think, like for the panelists or even Sally, like how do you think it would be how do you think the global plastic treaty would be a venue to incorporate justice for Southeast Asian countries and of course end waste colonialism? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colleen. I think that's a very relevant question to ask right now, and in this conference in particular. Any other question? If not, Bella, we got two questions, and then we can answer later. Bella, please.
Thank you. So I want to add some more comments regarding the illegal waste trade. So for Indonesia, I think we already have the regulations that try to cover several different ministries between the Ministry of Law and also Ministry of Environment. But the trickier part may be on the implementation part of it. But there is a big legal gap that I think need to be addressed in this room regarding the nurdles. Because internationally, regionally, and even nationally, we don't have any exact regulations on nurdles, especially on the nurdle shipment. For example, if we saw the tragedy on the export press ship in Sri Lanka, we have this big legal gap regarding the nurdles shipment. So how to make sure that the nurdles is safely shipped from one place to another. So I think maybe I think that we need, you know, a legal maybe regulations both on international level, regional level, and also national level on this matter. So maybe I hope for some reactions from the panels and also maybe from Sally regarding this matter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Bella. So we'll go first with the query of Colleen on how to integrate social justice in the plastics treaty process. And would like to go there, Magus, please? Okay, go ahead, please.
Right, I have a question for Sally. Thanks for sharing in terms of the Unwaste project. I could see that you had consulted the governments. Have you consulted the civil society organizations who are working on waste trade in their countries? Thank you.
So that's 3 questions. So the first question, we go back again to the Global Plastics Treaty. Who'd like to? Yep, Natalie.
Yeah, good question. It's a country-driven process. If countries want something to be in the agreement, this needs to be negotiated. Is the sort of simple but maybe not very satisfactory answer. So basically what needs to happen is countries don't always have all the answers. And also the people who are negotiating this text at INC, they're from maybe one or two different ministries. They don't have the whole spectrum, right? So they're often also ministries, likely ministries of environment, sometimes ministry like foreign ministries, not necessarily like departments of fisheries or industry, or so there's many different aspects to this if you look at it from a life cycle perspective. And the people who are there don't always have all of the information. They can't, to make sure that this is really comprehensive, we do need to have that stakeholder engagement throughout the whole period, and we don't have a lot of time. So it's important, I would say, at national level that civil society, that research organizations and also businesses, that they really engage with countries, that they lobby, provide that information, highlight priorities, really show the options from a sort of life cycle perspective. We need to hear the voices of disadvantaged groups. We need to look at where are the legal gaps, because none of us have like all of the answers. We're all sort of learning while doing. And there's a lot of development cooperation partners. There's a lot of agencies that are working on this, that are providing resources. Maybe sometimes it's too much, but I think we need to use platforms. Maybe we need to strengthen platforms as well, also through the UN, to have this stakeholder engagement, to make sure that, there's very clear recommendations, what should be included. But then this does need to be negotiated at country level. And negotiations, it's always a give and take. You always need to find compromise with issues, but you need to have all the information first. You need to see like, where is there still a gap? Where do we need to make sure that we're not locking ourselves in with one solution? There's a lot of questions on, where do alternatives like bioplastics come in? Like, we don't want to replace one issue with another issue, right? It's so difficult, this issue, but, we are trying to tackle it. And I think that this one agreement is not going to be like, that's it. There can always be amendments. There can always be additions. You can always be more ambitious. But I do think that the stakeholder engagement, hearing the voices, having that information is incredibly important. So I can only encourage, those organizations to lobby their national governments and to provide those clear recommendations based on evidence. And UN and other partners are very happy to support that.
Thank you very much, Natalie. I hope that clarified that. And there's a question on nurdles first. I'm not sure who would like to speak on that, or anyone from the audience who might want to have idea on nurdles. But yeah, we can skip that, Bella, and we could schedule that on another session next time. And then the last question, I think, for Magus is directed to Sally on the process for the Unwaste project.
The short answer is yes. Of course, in this case for the Unwaste project, we really want to build that a platform for dialogue between the EU and the countries within this region. So that has been our focus. But within the country itself, like the NACs, what we call the National Advisory Committee or working groups, depending on how the government wants to call themselves, we have invited NGOs but on very specific expertise. In fact, in the last regional meeting that we had in June, there was a very good mix, and of course it depends on the country as well, right? We have to be sensitive about who the government are comfortable with, the agencies are comfortable with in the same room. Some of these organizations are obviously organizations that have been working with the governments already in terms of some of the issues and reforms and initiatives. So we do have to be mindful of who we invite to the expert meetings, but hopefully we can expand it to more. There is another, so we had one regional meeting which combined an expert group meeting with introduction to the existing regulatory framework within the ASEAN region. So focal points from the Basel Convention were invited, and then for the 4 focus countries I've mentioned, there were a mix of experts, including NGOs, and of course government agencies. Yeah, and there will be another one next year, and hopefully we can expand that.
It's good that we have these opportunities to know what each other is doing. So yeah, more convergence. Any other question? Because if not, I have a couple of questions also to our panelists. Maybe I can just throw this out there. In this panel, in particular, we talk about the Basel Convention and the Global Plastics Treaty. So I might ask you first, Magus, on what is the interface between the Basel Convention and the Global Plastics Treaty, or on what the network is doing in campaigning for the Basel Convention provisions or commitments in the Global Plastics Treaty process. That's for you, Magus. And then another question for Jojo. I mean, it's very important, your discussion on the local, what's happening at the local conditions. And Kunwasana also mentioned that there's a national roadmap for Thailand, and that might lead to more comprehensive legal and policy frameworks, such as extended producer responsibility. What do you think are the things that you might really want to see from your experiences at the local level that would be integrated at this legal and policy frameworks at the national level later on? So I'd like to get your thoughts on that. So maybe Maggie's first.
So as I mentioned there just now, no, Basel Convention doesn't cover everything. So if the Global Plastics Treaty can close the gap, yeah, you have under the Basel Convention some of the hidden plastics, the HS codes, and also what we are prioritize the NGOs are campaigning is to prioritize the upstream measures, yeah, to reduce production, and it includes restricting or banning unnecessary single-use plastics. So that is one of the calls. Yeah, and probably as Bella had mentioned in terms of noodles, yes, noodles can be toxic. Yeah, hazardous. So if that can also be included, because Basel Convention also talks about transboundary transportation and all that. So it has to be complemented and also fill the gaps. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Rocky. I think we just had the EPR consultation meeting last month for Thailand, right? Yeah. So basically, it's in the process. So I feel that based on that meeting that we had, I mean Thailand had, not me. I felt that for local level, small and medium businesses are still not incorporated into into the process. I feel that private sector are mainly come from like large company, and this is something that it will probably be beneficial for them, but maybe not at local level. For example, in Rayong where I work, for example, I saw when we did marine debris separation kind of composition kind of thing, I actually collect 34 companies for plastic PET bottles, and most of them are actually from very small and medium level, and they don't actually have and not only the PET bottle, also other kind of plastic, they actually don't have the money to to do anything better if we don't support them financially. So I feel that in order to change the whole system, we actually have to include their voices, include these people as well, so that the EPR will be implementable. For example, we know that a lot of plastic bags has generated in Thailand. Again, most of the manufacturers are actually from small and medium businesses. We need to include these people, so that our plan or national roadmap or anything will actually become implementable. Yeah, thank you.
Great insights, Jojo and Magus, and food for thought for the process of the EPR development in Thailand. It's good to know that it's happening, and not just in Thailand, in many other jurisdictions also in ASEAN. They're developing their EPR law. So it's going to be very exciting next few years in the plastics governance landscape here. So any other questions? I know this is the last few last few moments before we have our freedom. And yes, please.
Yes, you talked about the global plastic plastics treaty, what's the most what is it like? It would be a ban or can you expound more on this global plastic treaty, and what are the current level of its how do you say it, acceptance of other countries? Thank you.
Please let me know. But yeah, okay, so that might be the last question, and I might ask Natalie.
Yeah, we don't know yet. But it will not be something simple, just like a ban. I mean, personally, I'm also not a big believer of bans, of blanket bans, if they don't go hand in hand with, first of all, based on evidence of what is the most prevalent thing, and then also making sure that it's not replaced by an alternative that might also be bad or worse. But it will include options that include bans, I'm quite sure. So at the moment, countries are discussing different options. There will be a zero draft of this instrument of the agreement that will be shared early October, ahead of next INC, which will be in November. And in that zero draft, we will also see different options, also, issues like means of implementation. There is already an options paper that was discussed at last INC. So that really was building on all the different country submissions, where countries were identifying what different options they think should be available or should be prioritized in this agreement. So this is all online. You can have a look at the different options. It's still very much work in progress. And do keep in mind as well that, an option or a solution that might work in one place might not necessarily work somewhere else. So, even though I don't think it is one of the best solutions, incineration of some plastics might work better in Sweden for certain types of plastics, but it might not work so well here, or bioplastics might be, depending on what it is, if it's, really compostable, might be a good solution if otherwise it would land on landfill anyway. But if you actually can recycle something, why should it be from a material that then, contaminates the recycling stream? So there is no one silver bullet, and there's not one solution that fixes everything. And the difficulty is that the agreement will need to reflect that, and it will need to reflect different capacities of countries, and it will also need to reflect different, stakeholders who are part of this system, and this includes businesses, and it includes, research and civil society. It includes communities on the ground. So yeah, it's complicated and it's very ambitious, but have a look at what's already online. And do try to follow maybe these discussions and have a look at where there are possibilities to engage. Do lobby with your local and national governments on options, so that, I think it is good that we're doing this. It's very ambitious, but it is very much needed. So let's look forward to it.
Yes, Maggie, please.
Yeah, good that Chocho had mentioned about the SMEs. So when you're talking about the Global Plastics Treaty also, we are also the Break Free from Plastic movement, especially in Asia Pacific. We are now thinking of the just transition, because there's a lot of communities who are involved, the workers, so what would be a just transition in your country? Yeah, from upstream, you have the petrochemical workers and also those plastic producers, the workers in the plastic producing company, and then in the midstream, the consumers, the retailers. So we're talking about the alternatives. So what are the better alternatives? Like at Natalie, we don't want something, but then we come up with something new, which could also be still environmentally destructive, and also the downstream in terms of the waste pickers. So what is going to happen to them? Yeah. So what would be a just transition? So we have to start thinking about all this, before the plastics treaty is like inked. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. What did you want to say?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. So basically, I think following the ink too, there were actually two schools of thought. So the first one is that we need to reduce plastic waste in the beginning, and also come up with some design like EPR and things like that. But then there is another school of thought that proposed that we can still produce. And then we actually do that for recycling or that kind of thing. So I was wondering how we can actually balance that, because you know, the plastic manufacturer, of course, they would like to they would like to do that. So how we can actually balance that. Yeah. And also I understand that because I've been working at the local level as well, I feel that the local level has not really been widely promoted to the ink process. So I'm wondering how we can actually include them so that, you know, all voices are heard. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So, the first one is a hard question. You would like to take a stab at that? Or who would like to?
Maybe also for the second one, but yeah, it's a balance and it's a tough one because like I said, you have so many different vested interests. And also, you know, honestly, we have built this problem ourselves, right? Like we all love the convenience of just going on Lazada and Amazon and ordering something and it comes in plastic packaging next day and it's, you know, it's easy. And also, you know, there are some things we've built a system for ourselves that we're not going to change sort of the world that we've built for ourselves. We're not going to fundamentally change all behaviors. We do need to shift them, but it's not going to completely change. We do live in a fast-paced, globalized, convenience-based world. And I don't think that anybody would, you know, want that. None of us in this room as well, I think, would not want that anymore, right? But just the way that we do it is just gone completely awry, and the way that we use plastic. But I do think that, you know, plastic is not completely evil. We always have to look at it from a life cycle perspective. I remember there were big debates about, you know, why should a cucumber have that plastic sleeve around it? You know, do we really need it? We can't recycle that. And then, you know, some supermarkets stopped having that. And then there were a lot of cucumbers that were going bad because everybody always wanted a super fresh, really nice cucumber. And if it didn't look nice, they would take, you know, the fresh one. And then we had a huge issue with food waste. So that also creates, you know, lots of other environmental problems. So we can't replace one thing with another thing. It's very, very difficult. And you do need to have businesses on board. You do need to have producers on board, and you need to find a balance and a solution that actually works. There's a big issue as well in Europe now where companies are mandated to have a certain amount of recycled content in new products that they develop. Which in itself is great, but where are they getting this recycled content from? Because now it's a supply and demand issue as well. You know, we're not getting high quality, good recyclates that are competitive in price, and you know they're easily colored and whatever, and they can be recycled again. You know, polymers do break down over time, so we do need to have like a longer perspective of how we can have this just transition. Make sure that we have all different stakeholders on board. And a lot of businesses are willing to change, but they do need to have some kind of, they need to see where they need to change towards so that they can adjust their sort of cost and pricing structure as well. And, you know, we can't at this one time say like, oh, Coca-Cola, they're the evil ones, but also we really like drinking Coca-Cola, right? So I think it's a fundamental shift, and we need to have all the stakeholders involved, and we need to find a balance, and it will be gradual and step by step, and we're not going to solve it overnight. And there will always be plastic in the environment, and there will always be plastic from the very first plastic that was produced that will be in the environment. But we need to turn off the tap, and then we also need to clean up, you know, the mess on the floor. So yeah, I don't know, it's not a very satisfactory answer. This is generally an issue. Like, it's a big problem. But the thing is now, I mean, I remember when I started working on this, and it was like, we still had to sort of set the agenda. Now everyone's talking about it. So, you know, we're getting somewhere, but we're still completely overwhelmed by how much we're using, how much we're producing. And, you know, I come from Germany. We're very proud of how we sort our plastic waste, and generally our sorting system, we're like super proud of it, right? But we're also the biggest plastic waste exporter in EU. And, you know, and people are like, oh, it's fine, I can buy loads of stuff because it's recycled. But is it? You know, so somewhere else, maybe. So yes, it is an issue. You know, your waste, your problem. Don't create something if you cannot also manage it. And if you can't manage it, maybe you can, you know, find some way of doing it with your neighbor if they have a different expertise. And you know, yes, we live in a globalized world, but these are very important issues, and an international instrument will need to address these issues.
Thanks. And then the last question is in the local engagement.
Oh yeah, and local engagement as well. INC process, the issue is it's very far away. And you can only sort of join the actual negotiations as an accredited organization to the United Nations General Assembly. Now, it's actually not very difficult to become accredited. So if there are any NGOs and CSOs out there, please do check that process. It's not difficult. And then you can engage at least as an observer also in the multi-stakeholder consultations. But I would look toward big organizations to be sort of the middle person. So for instance, like WWF is working a lot with people in Thailand where, working with grassroots organizations, working with local level to trickle down the understanding, to hear the needs, and then to aggregate it back at the global level. Because yeah, it's very difficult otherwise to localize the global and the other way around. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. I think, yeah, we could talk more and more about this, on and on about the Global Plastics Treaty, but unfortunately, we don't have enough time. We can schedule another one specifically on the Global Plastics Treaty if you want to, but in the next year. Yeah, but at this point, maybe just one round, a very quick round among our four panelists on 2 lines on what their key parting words might be for our participants, on what they want to get from this session, and what the call to action might be. So just very quickly, and then we'll come to a close. So who wants to go first? Sally, always ready.
Not quite, right? So it has to be tailored to all the different and all the different people, all the different communities. But as Natalie has said, right, we have to find a balance. And if you look at plastics, right, instead of villainizing plastic, right, turn the paradigm shift a little bit and think about what is the real problem. It's not the plastic, it's how we are using it. And if we shift that mindset, right, then you're focusing on the right issues and trying to get it sorted upstream. That means right at the very top, because those are the ones that can prevent it from trickling down.
Thanks, Sally.
That's more than two.
Yes. No. Good food for thought. Anyone else?
I've talked a lot, so
Short and sweet.
no, it's a big issue, and all of us have a role to play. But I think we also need to look at what is already there at national level, at regional level, international level. What can we do with ASEAN? What can we do through Basel Convention? Where are gaps? And then also address that at international level. Yeah.
Thank you, Natalie. Magus, please.
Okay, so since I'm also a member of IPEN, participating organization of IPEN, they always say toxics in, toxics out. When you're thinking of plastics with all those chemical additives and there some toxics in it, yeah, even if you recycle it, you're also coming up with toxic products. So we are actually dealing with some toxics. Yeah, we're not saying humans are the problem. Humans created plastics, and this has become a problem. So we have to think about that.
Thank you. Magus, and lastly, Jojo.
Not much for me. So I think the roles of government, local government should be strengthened. As you know, that they are directly responsible for waste management, and it's really important to provide capacity building for them or financial support where required, something like that. So yeah,
right.
That's fun.
Thank you. Perfect. And I think that's a wrap. And those four call to action encapsulates everything that we discussed. Again, another round of applause to our panelists. I know we ran a little bit over time, 15 minutes, but yeah, it was such a spirited discussion, and love to have more soon on this. But just a few notes, housekeeping notes for tomorrow. Please, if you have not before tomorrow, please, if you have not given back the food cards, please give them back, because they have give it to Sally or JJ or anyone from UNEP. And for tomorrow, we'll have the focus on the ASEAN Environmental Rights Framework. This will start at a plenary session at 9 a.m. And then we'll have a lot of interactive sessions, workshop style tomorrow. And we would really love to get your thoughts on this initiative that is happening within the ASEAN for a human rights-based approach to environmental management. So I hope to see you there. It will be at 9 o'clock. And again, thank you very much for coming here and hope you have a good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye. Yes, sure. Thank you, Natalie.
I went on a bit too much.
No. I know it's perfect. It's fine. But yeah, good.